Joining me now on the Knicks Film School podcast, you know what? I think I'm going to give him this one. I think he's the Tom Hanks of this podcast. I always joke with Fuddy about the SNL comparisons, about the frequent guests. I think Fuddy's the John Goodman, or like the which Baldwin, whichever one of the Baldwins. Alec Baldwin. Thank you. I'm giving you the Tom Hanks. First of all, because your name is Tom Piccolo. Hello, Tom. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing great, and I'm doing even better after the Tom Hanks comparison, because that's as good as it gets right there.
You got a little Andrew. Come on, movie podcast host.
What's up?
Is the Tom Hanks cop not?
I think it works. Yeah, it works. I think he's more just like, wow, high praise. I just got compared to Tom Hanks for the first time in my life.
Because Tom Hanks is like, he's amazing at what he does. Multiple Academy Award winner, Tom Hanks, but he's also the everyman. You know, you can relate to Tom Hanks, and that's why I think it's a fitting comparison.
Right.
He's graduated to like America's dad, I think.
Right.
Where he's at.
You're like America's Knicks analyst.
The pandemic didn't start with patient zero. The pandemic started when Tom Hanks caught COVID. And we were like, oh,
exactly.
This is serious.
Yes.
So Tom is here. It's as always, courtesy of our friends at Talking Knicks. Also courtesy of our friends at John Boy Media, right? Can I say that? I can say that.
Totally.
Okay, there we go. We thank both of them for once again lending him out to us. And before we get into the Knicks stuff, we have a fun little gimmick today. I have to share a little bit of pre-show banter. So Tom, for those of you who don't know, is expecting his first child very soon. And if you're not watching on the YouTube channel, shout out Knicks Film School YouTube, you cannot see Tom's big smile. He's very happy. Is like, if there's an air of like lightness. I mean, he's nervous. Don't get me wrong. It's like an air of lightness about him. And Andrew asked Tom, "Oh, is this your second or your first?" And to Andrew, I say, Andrew, you know when you're talking to a man who has children. And this is not the man. This is not a man who is dealing with a small child or children.
Fair point. Tom clearly looks like he's had a good night's sleep recently.
Oh, he looks rested, stress-free. It's not fucking pasta attached to his, dried pasta attached to his shirt, or vomit or whatever.
I was gonna say, as opposed to somebody else who was joyful at us pushing this podcast back 15 minutes so he could nap.
He's not bringing the bottle of wine to the podcast. Some people.
Yeah, man. We've got a baby boy coming in July here, so pretty soon there'll be another maybe Knicks fan in this world. So we're excited, but also, yeah, we know it's gonna be sleep's gonna be hard to come by, the whole thing. I mean, my brother has 2 kids now, and so I've gotten sort of a close look, not a firsthand look, but a close look at what that's like. So you can't prepare for it. You just gotta survive it.
You know who I love are the people who are like, and if this is you out there and you take offense to this, I don't care. The people who are like, oh no, I know what it's like to have a child. I have a dog, or like I have a cat, or I have a fucking gerbil or something. I have goldfish. No, you don't know. You don't know. You can't know. It's also for you kind of look a little like Sean Marks. It's like Sean Marks, like he might have thought before he signed Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, I know what this will entail. I know the trials and tribulations that are going to come with my life. No, you don't. Now you're having press conferences three years later talking about buy-in and team and all this other stuff.
Hey, at least he's talking to. I'm just kidding.
Hold on. Did we get an NBA media member on here? Or is like a major media person?
The character I do.
I'm not going to name any names. That's a good transition. The Knicks are not the Nets. The Knicks are not in a position where we are dealing with curmudgeon-y superstars. We are dealing with good old fashioned third world NBA problems. Just trying to make ends meet, put one foot in front of the other. Which is, how we head into another offseason. So our gimmick today, we're going to go through some potential play, like lots of names are getting thrown around. I asked Tom to pick 3 names of names that are being associated with the Knicks that they might trade for or draft or not draft, trade for or sign or whatever, and who is most interesting to him, at least from like a fit perspective, because I feel like we don't ever go the next step of like, ooh, this player is available, let's sign him or let's trade for him. Oftentimes we don't get into the fit. Before we get to that, I'll just ask you, how are you feeling going into this offseason? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you feeling better or worse about it than you are about your impending child? How are you feeling?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I've been a little disconnected lately. Like I haven't been on Twitter much. Even the NBA playoffs, I've been watching here and there, but I haven't been like hardcore watching every game. I've probably watched more HBO's Winning Time than I have of the playoffs, to be honest. Like,
fair.
It's been a little bit of a respite, of kind of like a vacation for me. And then I got the DM from Andrew, and I was like, "Oh, I got to cram." This was like a final for me. I was like, "I got to study up a little bit." But no, I like. There's my expectations, I guess, are fairly low. Okay. I think I heard you guys, the two of you guys, talking, John, you and Andrew, on our pod last week about how the expectation is basically that Julius Randle is going to likely be back. Like, I think that when the season first ended, there was this knee jerk, like, oh, get him out of here at any cost. Like, we got to like clean slate. I think that sort of knee jerk reaction has subsided and reality setting in. Julius Randle's going to be back. Obi Toppin's going to be back. Like, I don't think that we're going to have sort of huge, changes on that front, but there are things on the fringes that I think could be interesting, could help this team going forward. But I'm going in where I don't think that it's going to be a massive scale off season. I've been proved wrong before, but that's sort of where I'm at.
I think if we're not sitting here in whatever it is, 5 months from now or 6 months from now, talking about, wow, the Knicks finally did it, they made their all-in move and whatever that entails, I think you're going to be proven right. And I think, well, again, I don't expect to see the same roster back. I think it is going to be more changes on the fringes, which is part of why I wanted to do this pod in this way with you, because again, I think when sometimes some of these names get tossed around, it's like, oh, this is going to be great because, once we move on from this player and like once we move on for that, well, and I guess what I'm curious to hear from you is like, okay, let's say they get player X or player Y or player Z. Like, how do you think they would look with this team? Do you think there's like one player that would need to leave to make it work well? Not, one player that, has to stay, or like, boy, this guy would complement this guy on the roster. So with that, I told you to think of 3 guys. Give me a name. Give me someone that you're interested in that they might be able to get this offseason.
Yeah. And I know I just said that I don't expect like huge changes here, but I do think that these conversations can be instructive in that, around players' skill sets, and like these players can, or these conversations can then be scaled to like other players and their skill sets and whether they might fit. So, for example, Donovan Mitchell.
Let's do it.
He was someone who immediately came to mind when you gave me this prompt. And then I go and I see that you guys, because you're Knicks Film School, dropped a 3-hour podcast about Donovan Mitchell.
Jeremy's insane.
I go and listen to it. And I'm like, well, maybe you and Jeremy will like only get into the cap stuff. And then I hear him dropping like pick and roll stats and catch and shoot stats. I'm like, what else am I going to say about this? Like the classic you guys.
Sorry.
But no, I think that there are still some interesting conversations to be had. And I'm happy to be a little devil's advocate here, because
please.
Because it seemed like the consensus was.
Yeah. What did you take away from it?
It seemed like the consensus was that we should not make this trade for Donovan Mitchell, given how much we know it's going to cost. Because we know it's going to cost RJ Barrett. We know it's going to cost young talent, and we know it's going to cost some picks. Like I think to think it won't cost that, you're deluding yourself. So that's a lot to give up for a player that we just saw kind of flame out in the playoffs. And I think one question you have to have is like, how much weight are you going to give this one playoff series versus Dallas? How much are you going to hold it against Donovan Mitchell here? Like, yes, he did a lot of atrocious on defense. There was poor decision making, But there are some fair questions there too, where it's like, look at his supporting cast. Like was there enough there in terms of shot creation, for him to be best utilized? His efficiency was garbage, but I mean, we've seen him prior post seasons when he's been tremendous, when he's, gone toe with, he had that series against Jamal Murray, which I know you guys reference. And so I think that there's this whole kind of notion where it's like, can beggars be choosers here? And
that's well put.
And, if you can get a talent like Donovan Mitchell, who's 25 in the door, do you have to do it? And I think the one question I would pose to you would be like, true or false? If RJ at any point in his career is as good as Donovan Mitchell is now, would we be happy?
Happy? My God. Ecstatic, it doesn't even begin, because that would mean that, and again, I think we did our penultimate All-NBA picks about a month before the season ended, Andrew, or whereabouts. And I had at that time Donovan Mitchell by a hair over Trae Young on my All-NBA team, with the caveat that like I thought both of them were top 15 guys in the NBA at this exact time, and because it was like some positional funkiness, like we had to pick between them. I think he's a top 15 guy right now, and if you told me that Donovan Mitchell is actually really closer to a top 10 guy, I would be like, okay, I think that's fair. I'm pretty sure I've gone on record as saying I don't think that's in the cards for RJ. And again, I'll get called a hater and all kinds of mean names, and that's fine. You could be a great NBA player. You could be a multi-time All-Star. And there have been, in fact, multi-time All-Stars who never make the All-NBA team. So like, I think there is a little bit of a gap between where Mitchell's at right now and where I personally see RJ's ceiling. So yes, that would be a true statement, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you want to factor in their age discrepancy, like Donovan Mitchell in his rookie year, he was 21. I mean, he did put up 20 points per game on better efficiency than RJ has done so far to this point on a winning team. Like, Donovan Mitchell was also a very good young player, right? And has improved over the years. I fully expect RJ to improve as well. And I'm not saying, you have to trade RJ for Donovan Mitchell. I just think it's not as cut and dry as maybe a lot of fans think, because we do fall in love with our prospects. If we had drafted Donovan Mitchell, I can guarantee we would have fallen in love with him too. So I just...
Oh my God. We would... I mean, I'm laughing because what we would all be saying if like Donovan Mitchell was our guy.
I think that you brought up a really good point on that show with Jeremy, though, as far as the fit with the Knicks, with Donovan Mitchell on this team, because
that's my concern. And specifically with Randall, I just want to specify like the notion of giving up RJ plus whatever 3 firsts for Donovan to bring him here and that's basically your team absent another like big move. That's more where he is. So yeah.
Pairing him with Randall does feel like a losing proposition. I don't think that they, maybe you put it this way, bring out the best in each other. I think they would kind of exacerbate each other's flaws to an extent. I think it would take the ball out of Julius Randle's hands a lot, but he doesn't do a lot off the ball. So, when you look at a guy like Rudy Gobert, it's, the complaints, the criticisms about him are that he can't create anything on his own, right? Like if you dump the ball to him in a mismatch in the playoffs, that's not good offense, right? He's extremely limited on that end, but it's hard to say he's not a good fit with Donovan Mitchell. Like he does, fill a lot of the weaknesses that Mitchell has as far as the interior defense. And then just as a rim runner, he's one of the best rim running bigs in the league. Like last year,
for sure.
He was, I had to hear, he was top 5 in the league in points as the roll man. He was in the 82nd percentile in efficiency as scoring out of pick and rolls. Rudy Gobert is not a non-contributor on that end, right? So he and Donovan Mitchell have some synergy there. And I think what I started to think was, especially in that conversation you had with Jeremy, you said Donovan Mitchell is going to basically play GM. Like they're going to make him, they're going to let him call the shots. And so if that's the case, I think that this conversation should probably skew a little bit more towards Rudy Gobert and whether Rudy Gobert should be a target for the Knicks.
Two quick things. One, am I frozen? I hope I'm not frozen. I freeze sometimes. Okay, good. Two things. One, I just want to pull up the RJ Donovan thing. I know, like, for me at least, it really does. Like, if you talk about any perimeter player, and like RJ Barrett, for as much as we talk about him as like the next Jimmy Butler potentially, he's a perimeter player. He still needs to be a perimeter player. Like, that's still, he needs to do perimeter player things. Like, Donovan Mitchell walked into the league taking a third of his threes unassisted and making them at like a really good clip, like as a rookie. Like, we're sitting here in year 3 and RJ Barrett is still like, he's under 100, pull up threes, and he's hitting them like 1 out of every 4. So that, to me, when you're talking about the gap, it's like, it's like what the men from the boys in the NBA today. It's like you either have off the dribble gravity behind the arc or you don't. And then there are other things that you fill in around that. But for me, that's kind of where that conversation starts. Regarding Gobert, I think Rudy's very interesting because, again, we're not talking about a bad player on offense. We're talking about a player who 2 playoffs in a row, first the Clippers and then the Mavs, ran into teams who went 5 out and Gobert couldn't punish them on switches, which is like, that's a very specific thing that he can't do. It's a thing that contributed to the Jazz getting eliminated in the last 2 years, but like, it is still one thing. And just the way the Jazz are built, I think he needs to be able to do that for them to function at a championship level, which, again, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the difference between the Jazz being a contender, quasi contender versus a championship level team. So, like, I agree with you. I think the slings and arrows are a little bit too sharp where Rudy is concerned.
Yeah, I think that when you consider Rudy Gobert, like, I think it's hard not to make a comparison to like Mitchell Robinson here. And like, the question would sort of be like, what does Gobert do worse than Mitch? The answer is probably nothing. I mean, like, maybe you could say putbacks. Mitch was, first in the league in putback points. Gobert was second. I think that the question is, Gobert is going to be owed more than $40 million a year on average for the next 4 seasons. And,
Mitch, you're probably going to be able to get a 12, 13, something like that. So, let's say a third of the cost.
A third of the cost. So, like, is there discrepancy in production really that to that level? It's hard to say that it is. There are probably very few coach-player symbiosis relationships out there that could be like more productive than maybe Gobert and Thibodeau. I think you'd get a lot out of Gobert on the defensive end, and would really rely on him to be that anchor. And I think that, I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation, but ultimately where I come down on it is it's just, I think you'd actually have to give stuff up to get Gobert at this point.
Oh yeah.
You would.
Because somebody else is giving something up. Like, somebody will talk themselves into him being, the difference. Whether they could talk themselves into, like, in behind closed doors, you give them truth serum. It's about what teams can sell. And in Atlanta or somewhere, I think Atlanta's an obvious one. Charlotte, maybe. I mean, these teams will be able to sell this to their fan base, I think.
Yeah. And just, circling back a little bit to, because I think I sort of land in the same spot on both Gobert and Mitchell. But, if Mitchell becomes available, I think that there is this question where it's like, does getting Donovan Mitchell make you more likely to attract other talent? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a fair question. I don't know. Do guys want to play with Donovan Mitchell?
It's a great question. I think they do. Do you?
Well, it's funny. So my barometer for this is going back and looking at the NBA All-Stars draft to see where he got selected.
That's great. Where did he get picked? I don't even know.
This is not scientific, but he was towards the very bottom in both years, the last 2 years.
Okay.
I thought that was at least noteworthy. Like, why? This is a type of guy who you wouldn't expect, like a Gobert, a Jarrett Allen in an All-Star game. Sure. But Donovan Mitchell, he's a great athlete.
That's a good point.
Like, he'd be fun to play with. So based on, a sample size of 2 NBA All-Star drafts, at least seemed like LeBron and was it Giannis didn't want to play with him.
Steph, one of the years, maybe? No? Steph, okay.
Kevin Durant.
Oh, Kevin Durant. There you go.
I remember one comment being like, yeah, who wants to play with those guys in Utah or something like that?
Well, so this was a Utah. That's why, like, I love the take, but I think there's like a lot of Utah to this too. Like when they were the last two players, because Rudy Gobert had complained for years, I never make the All-Star team. It's because I play in Utah. The national media hates us. And then KD and LeBron go to draft their teams, and the last two players left are Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And the TNT guys had a good laugh about it. And then LeBron goes, we never played with Utah back when it was like 2K or NBA Live. Like we weren't drafting Malone and Stockton. And then this year was funnier because James Harden went last because the trade, the draft happened the day of the James Harden trade.
That was pretty great. So. And LeBron wasn't that right around when LeBron had thrown some shade at subtle shade at Harden when he was blowing up Sam Presti and mentioned all the draft picks that Presti had made and didn't say Harden.
Well, that was there's a lot of stuff LeBron was doing
at this
because it was more. I thought it was more directed at Pelinka. Tom, I don't know if you remember where it was like, I always loved being in Cleveland. Don't rule out me coming back.
Oh, yes.
The All-Star game was in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And he's like, best GM ever is Sam Presti. And then the Lakers were like, shut up. We traded for Russ because you asked us to. Shut up. And then, here we are.
So I'm happy you brought up Russ because I want to close the loop on this because I think when I think of guys that those guys want to play with, first thing that comes to my mind is Kyrie, right? Because how many guys in the league can say like, yeah, I had LeBron James and Kevin Durant both be like, I want to go play. I think I could win a championship with that guy. And essentially that is what LeBron and KD did do at different points in their career. And what is Kyrie? He's a bucket, right? He's a guy, you get your bucket. And like Russ, right? For all of his faults, and my goodness, anybody with a brain knows he has lots of faults. LeBron looked at him this year and was like, you know what? He's a bucket. I'll figure out the rest later. Just give me the guy who's a bucket. Is Donovan Mitchell a bucket? I kind of think Donovan Mitchell is a bucket a little bit. I don't know. I know he does. He has his faults. He doesn't get to the rim like some of these other guys. So like, he's not a perfect player, but I don't know. Maybe he's a quasi bucket.
No, I think, he's at least a quasi bucket, if not a full on bucket. But I think, part of it is
0.68 of a bucket.
You look at like Russ's assist numbers and there's evidence there that he also is a distributor, that he'll set guys up, that he can find guys. Donovan Mitchell, I think his assist numbers are, what are they, in the 5 to 6 range?
I feel like that's where he's going to be. Like, I don't think you're seeing like 3 or 4 years from now, like all of a sudden you look up and Donovan Mitchell's averaging 8 or 9 assists a game. Like, I don't think there's like Andrew brought this up recently. I don't think there's a Harden future for him where we're looking at him like, whoa, is he one of the best playmakers in the league? Like, I don't see that.
No, I don't think he has that kind of vision or anything like that. But I just wonder if the perception of Donovan Mitchell at this time is one of someone who's kind of a ball hog, who maybe doesn't. I'm looking at like his assist to usage ratio, and I know like his usage is always crazy high, and it has to be on his teams. But that assist to usage ratio is not that good, and
it's been pretty for them. It's been getting better, but it's in the bottom third of the league the whole time.
Yeah, so it's funny because like as far as fit, like basketball fit, I don't think that Donovan Mitchell, it depends on everything you give up to get Donovan Mitchell, but at the same time,
the price. Yeah.
If you're keeping Julius Randle, then I just don't see the fit there. And I think that Rudy Gobert would be the better basketball fit, but would kind of not work just as far as the books.
Let me ask you this. Is there, because this was kind of why I wanted to have this conversation, then we can move on to like another player. Is there a move, like a realistic move? And if it could either be like bringing this player in or bringing this player type in or getting this player type out, that like, let's say a Gobert trade was on the table and you could do it through getting rid of Well, I guess we could talk about it briefly. Like, I guess it would be Randall and like
Nerlens.
Fine, let's do Randall and Nerlens because you're getting out of center, and one other. Let's send Alec Burks back to Utah, right? That works salary wise. So your team is then let's run through a hypothetical starting lineup. You're doing Rudy, Obi. I'm going big to small. You're doing Rudy, Obi, RJ. Did I send Fournier in the trade? No, I didn't. So Fournier. And Quickly.
You
like that team?
I do. I like that team. I think, do I love it long term? Not, it probably locks you into like a 500-ish, maybe a little better team, depending on the development of the younger guys. And if Obi's shooting was real is a huge question hanging over all this, because, if he can actually shoot the ball, then that's pretty dangerous. But
it feels like a bottom 10 offense, though. It feels like a bottom 10, or at least bottom half of the league offense.
I think, you would really be betting on RJ's development in that scenario. But you'd have to give more of the reins to Fournier, I think. But you're right. I know that's totally fair. That's a pretty rough offensive starting unit. If Derrick Rose is still coming off the bench and is, any semblance of what he was, then you could hope for some of those second units to be kind of feisty, but you'd be banking on Thibodeau working his magic and it being just a legit top 3 defense year in and year out. But again, I think it's a fairly low ceiling team that kind of feels like a steady 8 seed. I'll give them a 6 seed because I think Tibbs would work his magic, but it's a 6 seed that gets eliminated in 5 or 6 games. Let's move on to somebody else. Someone else that you're interested by the potential fit and like what that might look like. Yeah, I've been really interested in the Malcolm Brogdon talk.
Here we go. I'm writing a little something about Brogdon for Friday's newsletter. Let's get into it. Do you like Brogdon? Perfect. Are you a Brogdon guy?
Yeah. I love the idea of Brogdon, right? I really do. It's just he's had such a hard time staying healthy. Everyone knows his health issues. I think he missed like 40 of the last 50 games for the Pacers this year. He had like an Achilles, just not like an actual injury assigned to it. I think it was just like Achilles pain that lingered, which I never like. Like that's
called tanking. It's called tanking, Tom. Come on.
Maybe I'm just being naive. I don't know.
No. I don't think you're being naive. He had a legitimate injury at one point for sure, but I'm to like parse like how hurt he really was. Like I don't know with how Indy's season went. You could.
I think that's a smart read. I think it's a smart read of it. His contract, he makes about 22.5 mil for the next 3 seasons. Yeah. It's not breaking the bank. It's like that's a reasonable contract for this player, for this caliber of player. If he's able to stay on the floor, especially, he kind of becomes a value contract. So I was looking into it, and so I did a little sleuthing. That's kind of like a theme of this show. I went to the NBA All-Star draft, and then I looked at Pacers Reddit, and I was like, what are they saying about Malcolm Brogdon?
Wow, you went deep. You dove deep for us.
Is Reddit an accurate representation of how sane fans are feeling? I don't know. I go on Knicks Reddit sometimes, and it can be a scary place. But no, it seemed like a lot of the complaints about a lot of the fans were saying that Brogdon should be moved, and then a lot of them were saying that he's actually been unwilling to defer to Halliburton as like the primary ball handler. So I went a step further, John, for you guys. I told you I did this cramming for the finals.
I'm beaming like a new dad. I'm beaming and I'm honored.
Well, any chance I get to listen to Caitlin Cooper on her podcast, because she's so smart. She and I believe it's Mark Schindler do the Indy Cornrows. No free advertising. I don't know what I'm doing here.
But, no, it's fine. Listen, Caitlin Cooper, friend of the show.
Yeah, she's been on the show, right? I mean, so I listened to her talk about it on their show, and she was saying how she has a segment called One Big Number, and it was the number was minus 17.2. And that was stood for the Pacers were minus 17.2 points per 100 possessions when Brogdon and Halliburton were on the court together.
Oof.
And it was just a 200 possession sample size, so not huge. And there was some noise in there. But her point was like that there was some of this like unwillingness to defer to Halliburton, that Brogdon would slowly bring the ball up the court and that Tyrese would go long stretches without even touching it. And she described it as Halliburton jumping out of his skin to get the ball and go. And I was like, this is someone who watches these games a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, I trust her opinion far more than I do my own of a team I don't watch. I watch them 4 times a year or whatever. So it gave me pause to the whole Halliburton conversation, because in theory, on paper, this is a two-way guy who can play on or off ball. He's got size. He can shoot it. He likes to drive and get to the paint. There's not a lot to dislike until you factor in this injury risk and maybe this lack of willingness, where I could see that issue transferring itself to he and RJ as well.
So the thing with Brogdon that's I kind of go back and forth on is it's like he is very clearly like somewhere between the 12th and 18th best point guard in the league. You know, it's like somewhere in that range. You kind of know what you're going to get. I don't know. I've been interested in him for a while, and like you look at the on-off numbers of his time in Indiana, and like some of them are like not great. You look at Brogdon's 3-point percentage, and it's been very hot and cold over the last four years of his career. Like there's a lot of fluctuation in there, and it's a guy that we just attribute, or we just think like, okay, Brogdon's a good shooter, right? He's going to shoot whatever, close to 40% from 3. Well, you know, you look up and like there've been a couple of years where he has not shot that well from 3. Yeah. And then the injury stuff, and like the thing, you know, and I think I mentioned this on our pod at some point, I'll say it again. Like when Julius took the extension, many of us, I don't want to loop you in to people who said this if this was not one of you, but I think a lot of people were like, oh, wow, awesome job by the Knicks. You know, they got this player whose value is so much higher than this potentially to commit to this number. You know, great job by them. When in reality, like, do NBA players ever turn down the money? Like, no, they don't. And Julius knew what he was doing, because I think deep down, Julius knew what type of player he was. And for a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who the season before he signed the extension that hasn't even kicked in yet, like I'm sure you remember, he was in the all-star conversation, you know? And if you're like a slightly sub all-star level point guard that willingly signs for 2 years, is it 20? I think it's like 21 and 22. He's making a little more than $20 million a year. Like, and you could tell me like, okay, well, he's guarding against the injury stuff and he just wanted to take the guaranteed money. Okay, fine. I guess, but I don't know. It's like, this is a guy who kind of knows what he is. He knows what he's not. And maybe like, where is it getting you? Maybe this is a very long-winded way of saying, like, where is it getting you? Like, what does it do for the Knicks to trade Malcolm Brogdon versus giving the job to Quickly, or if you get a Brunson? I don't know if you want to talk about Brunson, but I guess that's my thing. And I don't really have a great answer for that question.
Yeah. And I think, part of it is just that unreliability you were talking about, like whether it's, availability to play games or that 3-point shot. I just pulled up his stats here because I was kind of taking for granted that he was a solid shooter. He was a 40% 3-point shooter as a rookie. He had one season where he was, upwards of 43%, but he's had a couple seasons in there where you're like, what was going on there?
Yeah.
So it is a little, to your point, it's a little hard to know. Yes, he's between 12 and 18 as a point guard, but that's actually kind of a wide range, like, top half or towards the bottom half of the league as a point guard. I'm with you that you wouldn't want to like give up much of value to get a guy like him. I think he'd probably be a nice to have and be a part of the rotation, but I don't know that you'd want to bring him in like at the expense of much of Quickly's playing time.
Yeah. I like more and more. And this is why, like I wrote like a free agency primer, and like after Tyus Jones, who I think if they, and I was very specific, I'm like, if you get Tyus Jones on the mid level, fine, fuck it, get Tyus Jones on the mid level. He's a nice little player. Outside of him, I'm like number 2 on my list was like Gary Payton II. Do I think Gary Payton II is the second best player on the free agent market? No, of course not. But like, you look at these guys who are out there, and this applies to trades as well. And you have to ask yourself, like, what are we doing here? What are the Knicks doing here? What is the point of whatever they do this summer? Because I think we're at the point where we've seen enough from these kids, and specifically quickly. And if you want to throw RJ in here, you want to throw Obi in here. Like, I think this is where that's why I kind of wanted to have this conversation. Like, what are you getting out of these potential moves? Like, yes, you may be getting a little bit better. And like, we are always at the point where like, we're still trying to like, just get better. But I think there's a difference between getting like a little better, like the certainty of getting a little better, versus like, hey, you got a kid over here and quickly who like, and then this to me is like very different from like, once upon a time we were all like clamoring, like, let's see Frank play 35 minutes a game. Like, quickly shown us a lot more than Frank ever has. Like, you get where I'm getting at here?
Yeah. I mean,
all due respect.
You want to get better. You no question want to get better. You want games to matter at the end of the season. You want a chance to play high leverage games in the playoffs, but you don't want to get better to the detriment of the young guys. And I think just based on that brief amount of research I did on Malcolm Brogdon, I think that would be a concern I'd have, that maybe his style of play, his ball dominant style of play wouldn't gel so well with your Quickleys and your RJs. And then you don't get the chance to see, I mean, even like a Grimes, right? Like he's kind of in that role too.
For sure. Yeah.
Cam Reddish, I'm sure, will be playing plenty of the 3 spot. And, there's a lot of young talent on this team. And so you do have to be realistic about what your goals are with these transactions. You're not like, your home run swing would be Donovan Mitchell. And I don't think that one's getting over the fence. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
even if you land that, your ceiling is only so high until you bring in another star. It's a challenge. Like, honestly, I don't envy Leon Rose's job right now. It is a difficult task he has in front of him to try and make this team better while, keeping youth a priority, while satisfying this fan base. Like, it is going to be a real balancing act. And no one that we've said so far is like, oh, definitely, like, go get them. You know what I mean? There's pluses and minuses to all these players. And maybe more minuses than pluses.
I have it up, so I just want to go through it on the Halliburton Brogdon point. And again, shout out to Caitlin Cooper for bringing this up and for you to bring it up here. So Brogdon came back late in the season. After he had 2 games back, then another game off. He was kind of like getting back into the flow of things, and then starting with his 31st game of the season. He took 18 shots at Orlando. Halliburton took 16. Next game, Halliburton 23 shots, Brogdon 18, Halliburton 16. Next game, Brogdon 23 shots, Halliburton 8. Next game, Brogdon 17, Halliburton 11. Next game, Brogdon 15, Halliburton 14. Brogdon then missed 2 more games, came back, and the difference was, against Memphis. 13 for Brogdon, 10 for Halliburton, and then 19 for Brogdon, and 9 for Halliburton in what was a 3-point win against Houston. But the previous games they played together, 33-point loss to Memphis, 3-point loss to Cleveland, 10-point loss to Washington, 5-point loss to Detroit. Like, yeah, things didn't go so well with those guys on the floor together. I bet you he's traded, Brogdon. I think he's gonna be traded somewhere. I just don't, I feel like there'd be more smoke around here if it was going to be a trade to the Knicks, but who knows? Give me one more guy before and then we'll finish up on some draft stuff. Is there anybody you think, like, any of these names that I tossed at you where you're like, yeah, that's a guy I really want to see with the Knicks, and like, I think it could work?
I mean, it's funny because everyone, again, in theory, I'm looking at these guys. I'm like, that's interesting. I'm curious to see where that would go. And like, another name that popped out to me was Colin Sexton. I've like kind of always had a soft spot for Colin Sexton. I don't know why. I think it was
Andrew's nodding, big shit eating grin.
Well, it was that one game in college where he like went like, was it
3 on 5? Yeah.
3 on 5. Something crazy. It just stuck with me because he obviously showed a ton of heart. He looked like a winning player there. You know, the on-off numbers in Cleveland would say otherwise. And he actually really didn't play that much this past season. So you need to go back to like 2020, 2021 to actually look for like a legit sample size. But yeah, I mean, you do see some of these on-off numbers, like the Cavs have performed better with Sexton on the bench versus on the floor, like every season. And there's evidence that he's really struggled while running point. So like in the minutes played without, say, Darius Garland or Ricky Rubio, there's some question marks there, right? Like the more you do some digging, the more you're like, so where is he going to fit in? Is he going to play next to Quickly? Is he going to be the point of attack defender? Is he going to start at point guard and then Quickly is going to, sub in for him coming off the bench? Maybe that works. But, Sexton Fournier as your defensive backcourt is brutal. That is not going to work. So it's just, then you're talking about bringing Fournier off the bench and having like Grimes and RJ kind of being your two wings. I don't know. Like Sexton he is enticing because of his ability to get to the rim. Like every year he has gotten better at getting to the rim and he's improved his
converting.
And converting. Every year he's gotten better. The mid-range, he does take a lot of like floaters and kind of pull-ups and just like frequency wise, if you're looking at like cleaning the glass, he doesn't take a ton of threes for a point guard or combo guard.
This is my Brogdon thing. This is my Brunson thing. Like you have to do more than just look at a guy's percentages from deep to be like, oh, that person's a 3-point shooter. If you actually watch like Brunson play, like he does not want to take threes. Like if he's standing there and there's nobody within 10 feet of him, he'll take the three and like he makes them in a decent clip. But there's a difference between that dude and like the dude who's like, okay, where can I get the guy to go under the screen so I can pull up? Like that's not Jaylen Brunson. I'm not saying that's not that you don't sign Jaylen Brunson for that reason. I'm just saying it's an issue. Same thing with Colin Sexton. It's not what Colin Sexton's looking to do, And if you got that guy and he's not really a point guard. And again, last season the season before this past season, guy played more than 35 minutes a night, averaged 4.4 assists. That's the very definition of like, okay, he needs to play alongside the primary playmaker. And if there was a way to do a roster construction where he could be your nominal point guard and you had a Luka or a Jokic, or I'm trying to think of how many other like true like jumbo playmakers there are. And like, there's not that many of them because it's really freaking hard. Like then I would say, okay, let's bring him aboard. And for anybody who's like, oh, we have RJ Barrett. RJ's not that guy, and I don't, all due respect to him, I don't think he's ever going to become that level of like, an offensive engine for a great team. So,
yeah, I mean, that would be a huge leap for RJ and would be a much welcome sight. But I think, kind of similar to the Donovan Mitchell thing, like Colin Sexton, he has a high usage. He doesn't get that many assists for how often the ball's in his hands or how often he likes to shoot it.
Yeah.
And I think the defense really is an issue for him. And in general, he does kind of occupy the same space as RJ. He's just smaller, right? Like he likes getting to the paint. He likes attacking. He likes to get to the line. He's got some overlapping skill sets with RJ, but I don't know that they would amplify each other in that way. So I've kind of come on here and just shot down name after name, but
that's why we love you, Tom. You pour cold water.
It's really hard.
It's that's what makes this offseason so fascinating. It is. And that's why I think partially why the thing you came on here and you said, and I've kind of gone back and forth about this, like if there's no big move to be made where it's like the situation presented to them, it's like, okay, here's your star trade. You got to make it. Like maybe they do just kind of run it back with a tweak here, a tweak there.
Yeah. And I wonder if Andrew has any like pro Sexton insight that maybe we left out or maybe we slighted Colin Sexton in some way, but I'm
here for all the Sexton takes. Tom. I'm here. I can't. Let's talk about Sexton, baby. Let's do it.
You'd be unbearable if they fucking got this guy with these nonsense.
Yes, I would, especially if they don't trade Obi. So I get to be right, and they still keep Obi. Yeah. Also, most of it's facetious now, and it's funny. Jeremy on Cream Capitals Everything Around Me just addressed a Colin Sexton hypothetical that the proposed deal that we heard last summer when we were hearing every rumor possible about the Knicks and their cap space is that Obi knocks one of those 2 picks they had for Sexton was like a hypothetical trade thrown out there. And some of us were like, do it. Like Tibbs is never going to play Obi. And then lo and behold, Tibbs never played Obi. And
it was good that they did not make the trade.
That's the hindsight though, is that they didn't make the trade, and we're all like, regardless of whether he played him, I want to see what this Obi Toppin thing becomes. And the price has come down for Sexton, I think.
I'm curious what they would ask for, because the sign and trade stuff is so funky because you're talking about I mean, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but like if you're the representatives of the player. The player's agents, like what do you want? You want money? You want playing time? You want, a good situation where your guy's going to shine. And that may not jive with what, the team that's willing, like if the team is willing to give him the money and give him the role, then they may not also be willing to give up a lot of stuff to like give him those things. So I don't know.
I think you guys would agree. If you have to like convince the Cavaliers to trade Colin Sexton, like if they want him and you have to convince them by giving stuff, I think we're all out on Colin Sexton. This is he's leaving anyway, just get something type of thing for Colin Sexton. Like if they want to keep him and like they'll match any offer, then that's actually what they'll do. We don't want to actually convince them to give us Colin Sexton.
So can we before we finish up with some very brief draft talk, and this will be a good transition into the draft talk. Can I put you under the umbrella of play the kids next season, Tom? Is that fair to say?
I'm skewing play the kids. I mean, it's hard to watch these playoffs and not be a fan of Jalen Brunson. I do think that he's just a winner. Like, even going back to his college day, he won 2 national championships at Villanova. He's just got like something about him. I remember when Fred VanVleet was going to be a free agent, and we were all talking about, you don't want to overpay a small guard, and he'd shown some championship DNA with that Raptors team with Kawhi. And I just remember thinking, like, he just seems like a guy who makes it work. He's just a guy who he didn't just roll out of bed and get to where he is. Like he's not blessed with all these physical gifts. Like these are guys, Fred VanVleet and Jalen Brunson, they're 6 foot, if that. Yeah. And they just, they're not Nate Robinson level athletes, right? They just are smart. They're smart basketball players. They know how to make winning plays. They make others better. And not all of it shows up in the stat sheet. I think watching Jalen Brunson, there have been games where it has very much shown up in the stat sheet, but even then, like he makes winning plays. I like him and just what he would bring to this team. And I wouldn't worry about the basketball fit there. I think he is the type of guy who amplifies those around him. And I just think that's who he is.
In case you can't tell, I am a big Immanuel Quickley fan. I really like Quickley. I think he has a potential to potentially, like, we're looking back in a year or two and, like, oh my God, look at what this player has been. I mean, even just look at Tyrese Maxey. And I'm not saying that Quickley is Maxey, but like a year ago, the conversations that are happening about Maxey now are not the conversations that, that were happening about Maxey then. What's changed? Opportunity. He got a chance. And again, like Maxey can do some things that I'm not 100% convinced that like Quickley will ever be able to do, but we also know Quickley can do some things, that are really special. So I want to preface it by saying that I'm with you on Brunson. If it's, and I don't even mind the money. Like if it's 20, if it's 21, if it's 22, if it's 23 a year, like that's never, and this is why I think the Van Vliet point is a really great one. You know what you didn't have to worry about with Van Vliet was that once that dude got paid, he was going to be like, all right, I'm good. We're good here. I could just kind of coast now. Jalen Brunson is not going to be that guy. Like, he is going to keep hammering, and he's going to just try to, that chip is never getting off his shoulder. So I like that. And I like what that would bring to the Knicks.
And I also think that Quickley could theoretically play alongside Brunson. I know those are smaller guys, but like we saw the Van Vliet Lowry thing. Yeah, both those guys are kind of built like fire hydrants, but Quickley with his wingspan, with his length, and he's not a sieve on defense. Quickley has the tools certainly, and has shown that he's a strong defensive player. I don't see any reason why those two couldn't play together, despite them being kind of small.
Yeah, 100%. What would be great is if they were able to draft someone in this draft that was like, a centerpiece to this whole thing, where you could put alongside Quickley and Brunson and RJ and complete the puzzle. So on that note, I know you've dipped your toe in the draft water so far. We'll have you on at some point later in the summer. We can get deeper into it, but just general thoughts, any general thoughts on the draft, any player in particular, like anything, your takeaways.
Yeah. So I haven't done too much as far as volume of players. I've been just kind of doing deep dives into a few. And the guy I'm looking at right now, who I'm most interested in, is Bennedict Mathurin, who I think is a pretty popular. I'm not breaking the mold here by saying his name, but ESPN had him going 11th to the Knicks in their latest mock draft. And, I'd say, I don't know how much you know about Mathurin, but he's a 6'6" wing. Yeah, enough. He led Arizona to the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. He was named Pac-12 Player of the Year and second team All-American. And the dude can really shoot the ball. That's the big thing for him is he hit about 42% from three on 3.5 attempts per game as a freshman. And then this past year as a sophomore, he really upped his volume. He was taking over 6 threes a game. And the accuracy dropped. It dropped down to 37%, which was low, which is quite low. But if you go and watch the tape, and even the stats back it up, he was basically assisted on nearly 100% of his threes as a freshman, and then dropped to nearly 75% as a sophomore. He was creating.
That's significant.
It was a crazy jump. It was nearly a quarter of his threes he was creating as a sophomore. So the fact that he was still hitting 37% on that kind of, much more difficult shot diet, I think is really impressive. It's pull-ups. And even as a catch and shoot guy, it's not only spot ups, he's running off screens. There were a lot of plays called for him, staggers and things of that nature, where he's, taking movement threes. So I think you have to believe in his shooting just because of how versatile it was. And then the other thing is, shooting aside, he's just a freak athlete. He threw down some dunks in this NCAA tournament that were genuinely jaw dropping. It reminded me a little bit, honestly, of J.R. Smith, kind of without all the, silliness, the on-court silliness that I think, has
how dare you
endeared J.R. Smith to fans for sure. But just in terms of the 3-point stroke, the versatility with it, and then the bounce off 2 feet in traffic, it's pretty impressive. The one thing is I don't think he can really create much off the dribble. He's not beating his man in half court sets. So he has a hard time getting to the rim that way, but he's a really, really good cutter off the ball and can get out in transition and get to the rim there. So, it's a useful attribute for him. I think he is one of those guys who were maybe in terms of the way he'd be deployed to be like Quentin Grimes, kind of in his 3-and-D role. But I think what you're getting, the trade-off there is that Quentin Grimes is an elite perimeter defender. Mathurin, I think, was just so-so. I think he was kind of reactive as a defender. He wasn't anticipating things. Grimes is just next level there, but he brings an athletic and a bounce factor that Grimes does not. So that'd be your trade-off there.
Yeah, you asked me what I knew about Mathurin. Here's where I'm at with Mathurin. I know enough to. He's probably the top guy. I'm asking myself, like, why would he still be there at 11 or 12 if they don't move up? Where it's like, okay, he can't create off the dribble, and he's not really, he's not even really in terms of his assist numbers. I think he averaged like under 3 assists a game. So it's like, we're not talking about a Donovan Mitchell situation where he's, at the shooting guard position could walk in and like average 5 assists a game as a rookie. Like, I don't think he profiles as that, but like, he's a big wing who could shoot, and like, he's not going to be targeted on defense, right? That's, he's just like kind of fine.
Yeah, he wouldn't be targeted. He's too big and strong. Like, he is physical, and he's a great offensive rebounder. And I think that could translate to the defensive end as well. I wasn't as impressed on the glass with him on that end, but offensive rebounds, he was off free throws. He was grabbing rebounds. It's pretty impressive stuff. So I think he wouldn't be targeted on defense. Passing wise, that's definitely an area for improvement. Because he has a hard time breaking down guys off the dribble, he can't really like penetrate and kick so much. So, the shots he was creating for his teammates, the reads were super basic. But I think that's kind of similar to a Quentin Grimes in that respect. So
that's good to know, though.
Yeah. So I think that there is a chance that he could drop if teams are focusing or keying in on those sorts of things. And like I said, defensively, I think that Tibbs could really teach him a lot, and he could become a very solid defender because of all the tools he has. But it wasn't like innate for him at the college level. He was doing some either watching his man or ball watching. He wasn't kind of seeing the whole picture. That was kind of my first impression.
I think. Again, I have not done the homework yet. I will just say that I think him and Dyson Daniels are my two. Maybe we're overthinking it, guys. And if one of those two fall, and they end up keeping the pick and using it and intend on playing that player in the rotation, there's a lot of ifs there. I have a feeling those are the two guys that I'm going to wind up kind of settling on. Not there yet. There's some other players that are interesting, but we'll see. I'm happy you did that little run through Mathurin because he's interesting to me. I'll say that. All right, we did it again, Tom.
I'm feeling good.
Andrew, how do we do?
I think you guys did stupendous.
Very kind.
I need a 1 minute review of season 1 of Winning Time from Tom Piccolo.
That's good. That's a good ask.
Man, I really enjoyed it. I think it did start a little slow. But as soon as you get to I feel like we all kind of know what happens in that season, and we certainly know how it ends, right? But look, I wasn't so hung up on, Jerry West is being portrayed this way. Maybe a couple times I was like, Jerry Buss has a family. They probably shouldn't be. They could be a little cavalier, I think, in their portrayals of these real humans, right? But at the end of the day, if this is fiction, this is a fictionalized version of what happened. And as long as you keep that in mind, then you won't get so caught up on is this historically accurate? At the end of the day, it was a super entertaining show. Adrian Brody was Pat Riley. Are you kidding me?
Inspired casting choice. What do you think?
Yeah. I was all in on that. Jason Segel as Westhead was solid too. He was just constantly quoting Shakespeare. You're like, there's no way this coach was quoting Shakespeare so much in an NBA locker room. But we had our guy playing the gentleman who had to leave the team for drug use.
Oh,
that gentleman would be Spencer Haywood.
Spencer Haywood,
former
52-year-old Avon Barksdale playing 30-year-old Spencer Haywood. Yes,
the age of Haywood didn't bother me so much. Dr. J's age kind of bothered me a little. I went back and looked. He was 29 in this season, and the actor looked like he was 43. But, Spencer was going through it in this season, and so the actor he did an incredible job, I thought. And all the Spencer Kareem scenes I was all in on. So no, overall is a great first season. I was hooked. I do think there are probably like 3 episodes you have to sort of get through before you really start rolling into like the actual Lakers basketball stuff, which is the stuff I care about, you know? Yeah, I'm excited there's gonna be a season 2.
All right.
I am as well.
That's pretty good review.
I said this to the guys on Playback because Benji and I would basically spend like every halftime giving our reviews of the most recent episode of Winning Time.
Yeah.
And about midway through the season, I was like, there's some really great writing going on by McKay. And yes, they're like making shit up left and right, but like they're also like The Big Short is about real people, but the writing is so good that you don't care if those aren't the exact things that happen. Same thing with Vice and all the other things that McKay tackles. I felt like at a certain point, I was like a comic book fan that was like, this is not accurate to the comics, therefore it's not valid. And then I kind of turned that part of my brain off and I was able to enjoy it.
Good job by you.
Yeah.
For the basketball segments, I was still going on to Basketball Reference.
Oh,
and looking up individual games and being like, how did this player really perform in this game? The off the court stuff, I was able to let go and be like, you do whatever you want with Genie Bus. Like that's fine. But,
right. Have you read Perlman's book?
I have not.
So I read the book and knew what was true and what wasn't from like Perlman's reporting on the book and that time in Laker history. I don't know if you heard this from the pod, but like this show got me going down this rabbit hole on YouTube of rewatching games from the 70s and 60s, just because they're all there. Magic's Game 6 performance. I rewatched it the other night.
The whole game?
Yeah. Well, when you edit 3 hours worth of cap or no cap, you have a lot of exporting time.
He's the real hero. He's the real hero.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I would love if they like gave a little bit of credit to Jamal Wilkes, who like dominated the entire third quarter. Is barely mentioned in the last episode.
No love for
whatever.
Wilkes.
Michael Cooper had 6 points in the game, and 2 of them got their own scene. But I digress. The movie, the show, I thought it was well done and well acted to HBO standards. And if you just ignore the fact that it's like 25% made up, it's good.
Yeah, and I mean John C. Reilly, I didn't even really mention him, but he was incredible.
MVP of the show.
Yeah, there was that rumor that like Will Ferrell was originally cast for that role.
Oh no, that's not a rumor. That's real. That's why McKay.
Seriously?
That's why Will Ferrell. So originally, Will Ferrell and McKay's company bought the rights to this show, and Will Smith. Wow, Freudian slip. Will Ferrell wanted to play Bus, and so McKay, who was going to show write it and direct like episode 1, didn't think the fit was right. And so he went and got, he went and got somebody else who was going to do it, and Michael Shannon to be Bus. And then Shannon had to back out, and Ferrell like still didn't know about this. And so he went and cast Reilly instead. And since John C. Reilly is friends with Ferrell, he told him. And that created the rift in their friendship to the fact that they haven't talked in years.
Are you shitting me?
That is serious. That is.
I had no idea this was a thing.
Their company, Gary Sanchez or whatever it was called, something Sanchez Productions, broke up because of this show. They're not friends. I mean, like his press tour for the show, Adam McKay, he was like, the one bittersweet part about this project that I'm proud of is that I'm not sure Will's ever going to talk to me again.
Kind of worth it though. Kind of worth it.
I mean,
not for nothing. They also made the right choice. John C. Reilly was amazing in the show.
Yeah, I'll preface this by saying I'm not the biggest Will Ferrell guy, so take this with a grain of salt. But like, oh my god, that would have been a disaster. And like, I am also I think I've said this before. I think there's an argument that John C. Reilly is the best working actor today. Mm-hmm. I just think that dude's fucking outstanding.
It's a different show if he's playing it. Like, there's all the emotional scenes that Jerry Buss has. It's like watching Ron Burgundy miss his dog that got kicked off a bridge. Like, I'm not able to take that seriously if Will Ferrell.
Glass case of emotion.
Yeah, like if he finds out that his mom is dying, he goes into a glass case of emotion. You know, I have to buy the Lakers, he says in his Ron Burgundy voice. I have to do the news.
chugging milk.
Yes. Lakers assemble.
Chugging something.
Yes.
All right.
Start quoting Anchorman. There you go.
That's a new bit that we should do. Okay. Tom, you're amazing. For anybody at home who somehow doesn't know where to find you and your great stuff, can you just inform them, enlighten them, please?
For sure. Yeah, man. You can follow me on Twitter at Tom_Piccolo. We are still putting out content for Talking Knicks. You can follow us at Talking Knicks on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can listen, subscribe to our podcast as well.
Let me know if you want to do a couple more guest scribe sessions for the newsletter before next season. I'm open for business whenever you want to.
All right, we'll do.
All right. Awesome stuff from Tom. If you're not following him, go change that. Check out Talking Knicks. Tom Piccolo, ladies and gentlemen. Always a pleasure.